Okay, let's get started. I'm going to start today to acknowledge that we gather today on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples who've lived in the Salish Sea Basin throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed from time immemorial. Please join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, the Lumbee Nation and Nooksack tribe, for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. My name's Terry Bryant. I'm the director of the Whatcom Homeless Service Center at Opportunity Council, and I'm the chair of the coalition. Welcome, everyone. I encourage you to introduce yourselves in the chat. And if you want to be sure to be added to our mailing list, please include your email. We'll be sure and add those in after the meeting. Our topic today is back to school. And is timely because October is Head Start Awareness Month. And Opportunity Council, I know this group talks a lot about homelessness and housing, but Opportunity Council has a really robust early learning program. It's huge. We offer Head Start programs, which is preschool services essentially for young children who are in low-income families. And we provide Head Start services in several communities across the county, including Bellingham, Blaine, Everson, Ferndale, Linden, Kendall, Nooksack, and Sumas. So before we start, we have some great guests from the school district, and I'm so appreciative of your time today. But before we start, I really want to frame this within our local plan to end homelessness because it is relevant. So our plan is based on 4 foundational pillars: collaboration, quality assurance, case management, and the Homeless Service Center. We spent a lot of time talking about case management with different programs, and even the Homeless Service Center, we've talked about coordinated entry. But the collaboration piece is special, and one of the examples in our plan actually names a partnership between Opportunity Council, Northwest Youth Services, and the school district, and that was a program called HSSP, the Homeless Student Stability Program. And here's the sad news. It's changed. It's a grant that's issued by the Department of Commerce. And this year, there was a lot more applicants across the state this year. The grant moved from one office of commerce to another. There was a new review panel that had over 22 people covering 9 entities, including youth and young adults with lived experience. And there was only 800,000 for the entire state. So they were only able to fund a few counties, and we were not one of those counties. So I have a feeling we'll hear about really the gap that's created in our community and how it's kind of hampered our ability to collaborate in that way. But there's just some context for you before we get started. And I want to I want to highlight Emily Humphrey Craigbaum. Thanks for being here. Emily is on our steering committee, has been for years. I've worked with her for years. She was in my cohort at Western, and she really helped me set up the folks that are presenting today. So thank you so much, Emily. And you're a family support liaison in the Bellingham School District. Do I have that right?
Yes, it's technically just family liaison if we're being
Family
specific,
liaison.
but I answer to that as well. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, and so we've got, and I'm going to, please correct me if I don't have pronunciation right. We have Crystal Morales joining us also from Bellingham School District, Margaret Valencourt from Linden, Julie Butchley from Blaine, and Mike Sidwell from Nooksack. So I'll go ahead and Emily, is it okay if you start?
Sure.
Or were you planning? Okay, and then we'll just pass it on, and then we'll do some Q&A. And then basically what I'm hoping to hear is about how your programs operate, how they're different according to the community that you're in, the challenges you're experiencing, gaps like the one I mentioned, and what it's been like through the pandemic. And I hate to say coming out of the pandemic, COVID is still with us, but as schools reopen, I guess I should say. And thank you, welcome. I'm going to stop talking and start listening.
Well, thank you so much, Terry, for all that you do. So yes, that was a great introduction, family liaison with the Bellingham School District, and me and Crystal are a part of our family engagement team with the district. So we have about 7 of us that are have schools that are assigned to us so that we are the point person to the staff and students and families at those specific schools. And models have changed throughout the years, but how it is currently is we have, so I'm the point person for Carl Kosher and Sunnyland. So if staff have a family that they think might be experiencing homelessness, or just in mention like, oh, food was hard this month, or any kind of needs come up, we are the folks that get connected with those families and offer support in navigating those resources and trying to figure out what might be available. Also, as well with that, we support students and families, multilingual students, so families that English isn't their first language, making sure feel comfortable. There's a clear way to communicate with the school. Like if a student fell down at the playground, want to make sure we can contact mom in their home language before the day's over. So we just work to make that happen. And Crystal will talk more about that as well. This is my thought too, with your prompt, Terry, about how COVID changed services. The first thing that comes to my mind with that is that it provided services that have been needed before COVID even. It's with the increased food stamps and the funds that were given to families, more resource, like I had access to more resources for families could do cool things. Like I helped the parent with a carburetor, like because we had a flexible grant from an agency like who was helping, and it was a family living in their car. So it's like a very needed thing, but there's not always money for that kind of stuff. So my thoughts are with COVID, the programs that came up, I feel like still need to be funded and continued. And I think with the school district, we work really like boots on the ground with the families and walking through and advocating. So I love this position, and I'm grateful that our district has the staff, because I see it, how much it does help walking alongside somebody to access our pretty confusing system. And I'm going to pass it to Crystal, and she works at our Family Resource Center at Shuckson Middle School, and she can kind of explain her role.
Hi, everyone. My name is Crystal Morales, and I'm the Family Resource Center Coordinator for Shuckson. We do have 2 Family Resource Centers. So there's one in Shuckson Middle School, and there's also one at Carl Kosher Elementary. And the function of these 2 resources are to connect families and students and also staff with local resources within the county, but also with academic resources that some families may not know that exist. Recently, we've noticed that we've had a huge wave of new families coming in from different parts of different countries. And so part of my job is to make sure that we're registering each of these students and that we're connecting them with their family liaison. For example, Emily, connecting Carl Kosher families to her, and making sure that they know that these family liaisons are going to be with them forever until they leave our district. But also connecting the families with appropriate food, clothing, and housing services as well. And we also do have interpretation support for these families if their first language is not English. So we have a coordinator who makes sure that all these families are supported in whatever language they speak. But also we also have what we call care packages that not a lot of families know of. And that's thanks to our community and school. Everything is by donation. So we're able to help families with personal hygiene and household items. So if you know of any family that could benefit from these services, please send them our way. Thank you. Now I'm going to pass it on to Margaret.
Hi. So I'm the Family Community Services Coordinator, McKinney Vento Liaison, and Foster Liaison for Linden School District. And we have 2 coordinators total in the district, and we split the schools up to be able to serve families, but we also have a center where families can come in to meet with us. Here we have our clothing bank. I started a furniture bank. So when we do help to find families housing, we do have furniture, and Lions Club members from the Linden Lions Club who will deliver furniture and put it together for the families in their homes. Started a donation fund that we have, so we're able to buy toiletries and lots of different things, car parts to keep people moving. And we also received from another agency a donation fund through COVID as well. That's helped us put a family in a hotel when they were in their car, 7 children and 2 parents, when nobody else was able to at the time, until they were able to get into another housing program. It's a little different out here in the county because we don't have the services ready available as in Bellingham. So we are kind of the social services for Linden. And so we serve families in many different ways. We're also in the schools with students, and parents, as well as parents here, connecting them with services, whether it's housing, getting them connected to medical insurance. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. About a week before school starts, we have our school supply distribution day and our info fair. So we had 14 agencies from Bellingham here this year: Head Start, Opportunity Council, CMAR, different agencies coming in to give that information and sign students up and parents up for programs, which was great. And this year in that day, we saw 117 families and gave school supplies to 275 kids. And so from that point on, we're on the run, whether it's qualifying for McKinney-Vento, providing the school supplies, medical appointments. We take students to medical appointments if they're needing glasses and parents aren't able to leave their job to take them. What else do we do? Sorry. We're a fully bilingual office, so it's great. We can provide that direct service with our families, and that is interpreting as well with the students and or with counselors or teachers as well, with the parents. COVID changes for us. There were some other pots of money that we did receive, which were great. My coworker was able to be full-time, so that was we were able to increase our services to our families, and not. We're still running ragged because it's nonstop, and we care about our students and families, so we just keep going. But this was great to have her full-time now and remain full-time. One of the things, though, is we had more families who, because of job loss, housing loss, who never had to ask for help before. And even this year still coming in and really needing to ask for that help and feeling really embarrassed, but they realize we're here to help them and just kind of peel through all those layers and get them connected to everything we can. I could say a whole lot more, but I'm going to stop and let Julie talk. Is that who I'm taking it to? I'm sorry. Yes, Julie.
Hi, everybody. I am Julie Butchley, and I am the Family Service Center Coordinator, McKinney-Vento Foster Care Liaison for the Blaine School District. And I'm the sole person who does that up here in Blaine. But a lot of what everybody's already addressed, I do here for the Blaine School District. We're currently at an enrollment of, we're down quite a bit, but 2,000 for all of our buildings. And we are located on one campus, so that, makes it a little easier for me to navigate. But that being said, resources do not exist up here in Blaine, not in. There are some, I don't want to, but the majority of what the families I work with need or seek are in Bellingham. And so there's a lot of barriers to being able to, provide, mental health or even medical appointments or housing. Just about every family that does get placed into some type of emergency housing is in Bellingham. And so then the kids will commute up here. But so I was able to, with some of the money that everybody's talked about, work a little bit over the summer to do some outreach and keep in contact with some of these families that really had the potential to drop off the grid over the past 2 years. And with, limitations. And so that was very helpful because at the start or the week before school, we did a distribution. I say we, but I did a distribution of school supplies. And that day alone, I handed out 245 backpacks with supplies, and these families signed up for whatever resources they wanted me to help with, whether that's Operation School Bell for clothing, or right now I'm working on holiday support for, Thanksgiving and Christmas. And then, they also could discreetly indicate if they wanted help with referrals for mental health, or even if they needed, help getting Apple Health set up for them. So whatever the need is, the goal is to try and figure out, if I can't help them meet it, who is their person. And so that's my liaison role, is to connect with the community. And I started in this job in, I think it's 2020, December 2020. So we were in the thick of just everything that everybody was experiencing. And so now I feel like, here I go. I'm going to meet people in person and still in Zoom, but and just build up those connections, because we are a little remote, and being where we are, housing is a little bit less up here. I think it's negligible, but so we are seeing a significant influx of people coming up here, whether they're in tents or doubled up, or I was commenting earlier today that Opportunity Council is even having families in motels here in Blaine, of which we have 2. So it's it's been an interesting year. And if I skipped anything, my apologies. We do vouchers, gas, food, all of that, vision vouchers. So whatever the need is, that's the role of the Family Service Center. So, all right, Mike, pick up whatever I forgot to do.
I think you all covered it all. I'm going to try to keep this brief, because I could just say same, ditto, I'm Mike Sidwell. I'm the Family Resource Coordinator, Family Services, Family Liaison. We all kind of do similar with, kind of similar titles for Nooksack Valley School District. I am only the sole person, as McKinney-Vento liaison and foster care liaison. I do work really closely with our migrant education coordinator, Sylvia. And she really overlaps. She might not know some details of my role, but she does a lot of the family services liaison, same work that I do, and supports. I unfortunately do not speak Spanish well, and she supports a third of our district or Spanish speaking families. So she has a really big job. And, similar to what Margaret and Julie said, it's being out in Everson and Sumas. There are a lot of county challenges with our population, our families we serve, in that we don't have, if I do any shopping for a family, it's outside our school district. Our families in Sumas don't have a laundromat, and Everson can be a long ways to go for those families that don't have laundry services available. So really, I do have a school district vehicle for that reason, because, if a kid needs a pair of shoes, I have to go to Bellingham. If a kid needs, if family needs food, I'm not going to go to the Red Apple in Everson, even though I love to support local, just because, I got to spread the money out for them. And so we had to be limited and careful with our gas cards, because I got so many families that would want that constantly, because it's a big issue, right? We all know the price of gas is skyrocketed, and families here are constantly driving. And if you think of a family making $15 an hour, maybe sometimes only, single parent or one parent is working, and they're working in Bellingham. The job is in Bellingham and they live in Sumas or Everson. So that really impacts that job, as you can imagine, or impacts their income that they're bringing home. So those are some of the challenges we deal with. totally echo what Emily said as well. As far as like those resources, I've only been in this role. This is my second year. So last year was a doozy. So I don't know before that, but I can only echo what Emily, you can see those COVID funds, those needs of rental assistance programs and everything else that those needs aren't going away. It's, hopefully we can continue to be creative, and I can't say enough how I'm looking down in the chat and being like, oh man, I should be like taking notes or writing down all these emails and names, because we rely continually on connecting with community resources, throughout Whatcom County. So I'm always learning somebody new and connecting with somebody new. And we rely on all of you all to, support our families, because that's a big part of our job. I can get food for a family and, gas for a family, but really, we want to lift families out of poverty. And that means, connecting them with resources, community resources. That's all I got.
Thank you so much, Mike, and everybody, Margaret, Julie, Emily, Crystal. Did I forget anybody? I hope I got everybody. Like to open this up for Q&A. I have a bunch of questions, but yours are more important. So you free to put them in the chat, and then I'll just ask them if you like, or raise your hand and we'll just go that way. I think I will kick off the questions by asking, how do you identify a homeless student?
I can answer. Oh, Margaret, go ahead.
Either way. We have one way that we do that is with a student housing questionnaire that goes out at the beginning of the year. We send them out with the student handbooks, but at the elementary school level, we send one home with every student also. We also have them online in the registration. We'll send them out again. Hard copies, we'll do a mailing to all homes about January. We also receive referrals from counselors or registrars as they are registering students. We work closely with all of them. And so if there's a situation that sounds like it could be McKinney-Vento, or they sound like someone is doubled up with someone else, or they don't have an address, they would refer them to us so that we can go ahead and talk with the family and figure out what their situation is. You want to add to that, Emily?
I think what else comes to mind is Opportunity Council and Lydia Place, Agape, like the housing program. So families through Opportunity Council, even if they're in a rental, but receiving like a short-term subsidy with case management, that family, that student will qualify for McKinney-Vento. So being able to remain in the same school. So continuing that school stability, and we can help with transportation as well. So that is another big way that we can connect with families, is through partnerships.
That is heartening, because it tells me that collaboration piece happens even without that specific programming from HSSP. That's great.
Yeah.
Did I interrupt somebody? Who was it?
Oh, I was just going to say I had the great benefit, because of being able to work this summer, of connecting with Lorelei Bowers, who does work with Bridge to Services, and she's out there, and she that group is able to reach people that the schools may not even hear about. They have children who should be enrolled, and so we've been able to partner, and she actually helped get a second grade kid into school at the start of the school year, and now we're working to try and help mom get out of a tent. So it's Margaret.
Sorry, I want to add one other thing. Our consortium list that Emily updates every year, or anytime there's a change that we get out to partner agencies, is another huge thing. CMAR sometimes will be seeing a family, and their medical case manager will go ahead and refer them out to me if they're coming out and realize they're in a homeless situation or need to be registered. So that's great too, just getting our information out there throughout the community.
Thank you. Amber has put something in the chat that I want to read out in case folks aren't following that. A not very well-known food source is Seymour and Cordata. They have a pharmacia every Tuesday from 12 to 2. You don't have to be a Seymour patient. And they have food buses from the food bank with extra vegetables. And if needed, they can walk in and get bus passes that have 6 rides and get 4 to 5 passes at a time. So there's another resource to share. Sherry Lapoff has a question. What happens with a family living in a vehicle when the temps are way below freezing?
That is a hard call to get. We lean on our community and try to support the family and know that we're working alongside them to try and do everything we can for what is available. So, I mean, if my first step would be calling Opportunity Council to do an intake, and if they have availability for a motel stay, that would be my first. If that isn't the case, then I would call Agape if they have an opening, and then I would call Lighthouse Mission Base Camp to see if their family room is open. So, I mean, we would work with the family to try to access whatever resources are there. I'd ask if they are part of any community groups that might be able to help, and just scramble, basically, just really trying to find what is available, and hope that it's not Friday at 4 p.m. when things are closing when I learn this, and hopefully it's early in the day where we can get connected and make sure that family's going to be safe. But
Thanks, Emily. Doug has a shout out to Lorelei, Bridges Services. They've been helpful in finding referrals for homes now and getting people housing at their tiny home villages. They do a great job. That was from Doug Gustafson, who manages 2 of the 3 tiny home villages, about 50 people being sheltered. And then Bree Hansley Butler wanted to know that food resource again. That is Seymour Cordata every Tuesday from 12 to 2. Any other questions, or should I carry on with my questions? I'll let you think of something and I'll ask one. Is your sense that there is an increase in families experiencing homelessness? And that's a loaded question because I know what we're seeing in the homeless service system. But I know too, I guess this is a double question. How do you define homelessness? Because I understand it's different for every service and every funding source. And then do you think more families are becoming homeless?
Yes. So, yeah, the McKinney-Vento terminology, you are doubled up, which is a lot out here in the county. If you're in a tent, an RV, a park, someplace that's not meant for habitation, if you are in a building that doesn't have water, it's not fixed, adequate, or regular. If it doesn't have water, it doesn't have heat. You can be in an RV and be qualified as McKinney-Vento homeless, which I know that's different with the Opportunity Council. It used to be that way and not now. And yes, homelessness is on the rise. We have more families either coming here from other areas, either far or in other cities close by, especially with the flooding last year, where we've had families moving all over. We also have people still with job loss who are doubled up more as well.
mm-hmm.
Did you want to add to that, Emily? You look like you might say something.
It's like anecdotal, so it just seems like, and Margaret kind of touched on this, but families who haven't accessed services before, and just housing instability for a lot more wider range of folks. And I mean, just with the rental market, I mean, we all kind of preach into the choir for that, but just how that has shot up continuously makes anyone at risk of not being able to find affordable housing. So I do think there has been an increase as well. And it's a general, like, stretched thin, and that adds like stress to everybody, and that goes down, it's just like the layers of just a living like paycheck to paycheck and the stress of that too.
Very true, Emily. Thank you for that. Vaughn, you look like you have a question.
Actually have a little story that I was wondering if I could share in response to the question, if I may, a classroom story.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll try to make this not too long. Yesterday we were trying to do, classroom culture building and in 7th grade core. And the question was, if you believe there's a statement, money always leads to more happiness. And if you think that's true, you go to one side of the room. And if you think that's not true, you go to the other side of the room. And it's supposed to, spark dialogue in best cases. So most of the kids went to the side of the room that said, no, money does not always bring happiness, more happiness. And there were a few on the other side that said that, yes, it does. And so one of the arguments from the kids who was like, yes, it does, was, would you rather be rich or rather be homeless? And there's some interesting classroom dynamics in general, but I'll try to fast forward through it. So eventually I asked the kids, hey, has anybody here been homeless? And one kid raised their hand. And then after seeing that kid raise their hand, 2 more kids slowly raised their hands and not very high. And after seeing 2 more kids raise their hands and 2 more kids raise their hands. And then I started counting, and then a few more shifted and raised their hands. And by that time, I'm getting all emotional, but I was managing not to cry. And then I asked, okay, for those who are raising their hands, do you think that money would have fixed it all for you? Or is there something else that would have really helped you the most at that time? And one kid said, what we really needed was peace and friendship. And it just was so unexpected that it floored me. And a couple more kids shared what they felt and what their experiences. And so there, to me, in my perspective in the classroom, in the school that I work in, I was not expecting at least 7 out of 27 students to have been homeless. And that's my story.
Thank you, Vaughn. You made me a little weepy with that. That was important to hear. I appreciate that. I'm going to go back to the chat for just a moment here. Lucy Rose has a question, and I think it's not a weird question, Lucy. Lucy's wondering if there's any resource for homeless tips interested in harm reduction, acknowledging that housing resources are limited and people are going a long time. And she's looking for tips like how to make a candle heater, keep safe in your tent. She knows some people zip tie the zipper from the inside at night and cut it in the morning. That is a really interesting question. I'm going to ask you all if you know of a resource like that and whether you think we need to create one. It sounds like maybe, Lucy, you're on course, so maybe we need our outreach experts to weigh in on that. Let me just say this. Do you think we need one? Should we put one together?
I'm the one who posted the question. I would absolutely love to create a resource like that, a pamphlet or something. Sorry, my camera's off. My computer is not working great. But yeah, I would love to create that resource. I would be happy to, if people are comfortable, like put out an email connecting us and see if anybody has ideas. And I would be happy to put that together just so that, a lot of people are new to homelessness. You guys are right. Homelessness is on the rise. You don't go out there knowing what to do. And a lot of people, some people are willing to help and some people are not willing to help, and you just go out there clueless. You don't know how to keep yourself safe. You don't know how to keep yourself warm. You don't know the areas that are safe, and I think it would be so useful because we do need to acknowledge reality. So if anybody has tips, I would love to I'll put my email in the chat. Maybe you can email those to me, things you've heard, and we can try to put that together.
I think that's a great idea. I'd be happy to connect folks that are interested. If you don't want to stay here or whatever, you can email me, the coalition. It's Terry_Bryant at WhatcomHSC.org. But yeah, I would like to connect people together who are interested in pursuing that work.
I think another question along those same lines would be like places to camp. I think I've gotten that question. Recommending like where would be the safest place to camp if you don't have money to pay for a campsite, which is a tricky one to answer because things change often too. And like Walmart parking lots seem to be changing as well as far as how long they're letting people stay. And maybe and that could be different now too, but that would be another thing, another question to add to that.
Yeah, we get asked that question a lot too, and it's a tough one to answer, especially when someone is looking for safety. It's a tough thing to guarantee. I think Sherry has a question I missed here. I'm wondering if any of you are aware of any thoughts or discussion regarding establishing tiny home communities in the county. Um, and being that this is kind of a families with children centered discussion, I don't know that we have any tiny home resources that serve families with children. I don't know if that's the context you're asking, but anyways, that's the question. Do you have any thoughts, or is anyone working on tiny homes in the county?
That is a conversation that's, sorry, Margaret. That's definitely a conversation that's happening. There's still plenty of families that are displaced from the flooding in our school district, the flooding last year. A lot of them, not that many with students, but we have a lot of residents in our community that are still in motels, and there is talk about a church out in Everson, putting a lot of tiny homes on them, on the property. But that's also that's a huge project, even tiny homes, right? You got to get running water and all that stuff. So unless you have an available RV park, it's still a long process. But it is still working on a solution for that.
Thanks, Mike. Oh, great. There's some interested folks that want to collaborate on a resource for camping outside and how to stay safe. And I'm happy to connect you guys later after this meeting. And Sherry wants to make sure that these ideas come from houseless people. They do ingenious things to get through the day. They do. I think that our clients without housing are super resilient and resourceful and smart and know how to survive, and they are the best experts in that. And I also believe that by starting that effort through the various outreach groups, that's where their information is going to come from, consulting their clients too. Joe has a question. What are the rates of homelessness among students in the various districts?
In the chat, or what were you gonna say, Margaret?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I just put a link in the chat. They call it the Washington State Report Card, and so these are numbers from last year, but you can click on each district, and it gives you data. And go ahead, Margaret, with maybe more specific info.
No, and I mean, just kind of a note about the last year's district numbers. The one thing is through COVID, it was also a little more difficult to contact families when students were not in buildings. We were still working and contacting families, dropping resources outside doors when they were sick, things like that. But not having eyes on all the kids was really difficult to be able to identify. So those numbers are lower. I know for us right now, we are at 74 and we're a month in, which is pretty high for the beginning of the year and a month for Linden.
Mm-hmm. And there's a couple different things too. In like the last couple of years, foster care used to be counted in McKinney-Vento, and then that's separate. So numbers, if you look at it over the years, it looks like it dropped, but really it's like designations change. So looking at the data, like that. And like Margaret said, statewide, they saw a decrease in McKinney-Vento numbers, but it's like we're not seeing that from the day to day that there's less need. So it's hard to feel like that's really accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and Blaine, I just, while we've been in this meeting, I just got an email about 3 more potential families that I've got to sort through, which, but I already have identified 41
Wow.
students in our district. And like last year, even with the challenges of identifying, you know, with the restrictions in place and whatnot, I think that if I recall correctly, we had 47 total. So here, you know, this is, it's a big start, a very big start. And then I know that I have 6 actually that are in process that I've reached out to, 7, excuse me, that I've not been able to connect with to verify yet. So it's up in Blaine. It's definitely a significant number, and it's like 4 hours of my week that is for homelessness. The rest of my hours are working with other families. So it's increased. So I'll be back.
Thanks, Julie. And I'm gonna ask you another question. Sorry. I was gonna ask everyone what makes, you know, the challenges in your district unique. And you made that comment about transportation for families that are housed in Bellingham to get to Blaine. What does that look like for a family that needs to get to back and forth to school from that distance?
Well, being qualified McKinney-Vento, we provide that transportation. So districts, we all have agreements that the districts are sharing that transportation. So if I have a student who's living in Bellingham, but they're attending Linden schools, then we'll work with Linden Bus Garage and Bellingham Bus Garage. And the outside district can choose whether they want to do AM or PM transportation, and then the home district will do the other. And so it's just that coordination. I know for our district, I submit to our transportation department. I get that information back. I connect with the families, make sure that they know bus times, and I do a lot of communication around that to get them back and forth with any bus changes. Because sometimes families move, they may be in one place and they may move again. So that's another transportation request. And we say it takes 3 to 5 days to set up that transportation. That just kind of varies a little bit. If we already have one route in place, it may not take that long. There are others, if a district is very far out or reluctant, and it takes some convincing and reminding that, no, you have to do that piece, it may take a little longer, but we still will be working to get them in. And that's the big part of when our office will do gas cards, is when we know they need it to get to and from school or medical appointments, and we can do in lieu of, it's called, to reimburse them. But most of our families don't have money to put gas in the tank in the first place and wait for a month to, so we do the gas cards instead.
One kind of tidbit with that is I think statewide, there is a lack of bus drivers. So I know, like, if you drive around, you'll see like now hiring bus drivers. So that's like something I always try to talk to with folks who anybody tells me they're looking for a job. That's something I refer to, because a lot of districts are low on staff bus drivers, which makes it hard on a lot of different aspects, but in this specific one too, because it takes a lot of time to drive to Blaine and back. So just that's another factor behind the scenes with how all that operates too.
Yeah. We have a shortage up here, and knowing, you know, Bellingham and the different districts that are struggling with staffing, our transportation director, I brag about her every opportunity I get, because she really is amazing. But she has just assigned a driver that is our McKinney-Vento bus driver, and because, you know, it was just with these challenges, it was we weren't able to work out something with Bellingham that would get these kids to school on time. And it's which isn't an option. They need to get here, and it's not just, I mean, we have kids in all, bring them all from all the school districts, but that's primarily where we do a lot of our transportation from. So it's tough out there, and it can be really long bus rides for these kiddos, and and during COVID, I had a number of families who were living in the motels in Bellingham, and so these little ones were getting up early, really early, and being put on a bus to and from school, and they probably weren't necessarily getting the best night's sleep with being in a motel with, I don't know how many other families were in those buildings, but it's not ideal at all. So
I was just going to piggyback on that, that just what Julie was saying, combined with the shortage in bus drivers, and it's a long ways out to Nooksack for a bus ride, and sometimes if they're coming from Bellingham, they might have a route to already go into Linden, and so they're not going to create a new route to go to Nooksack, so they'll put that kid on the Linden bus and then come out to Nooksack, just because you can't just poof and there's new bus drivers, right? They got to do what they can. Transportation directors, I mean, we ask a lot of them, so we stay in their good graces, but they also do. I've been really impressed with the transportation directors, the way they accommodate and try to work with, support all these kids. But just to Julie's point that, it's a long day for these kids. A lot of our families have a kid in middle or high school and a kid maybe in elementary school. So then those times are different at the school. And so then you've got an elementary kid coming out early, and then the middle high school kids staying late, right, to make it, because it's not going to be two routes, it's going to be one route. So combine that with the long commute, it's a long day for these kids, But we also know how important school stability is for these kids to have success. So it's a good thing, but it's also just awareness that these kids still have challenges,
And shout out to all the bus drivers in our districts, because they are, I mean, if for those long routes too, the students spending a lot of time with this person, sometimes it's a van, and that connection can also help get a kid to school, knowing there's someone there who's supporting them, excited for them to see them in the morning and after school. So I think bus drivers play a huge role in supporting our students.
Emily, you made me remember my bus driver from elementary school. His name was Steve. Everybody loved him. So that's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Are you, the shortage of bus drivers really made me think, because we all talk about how difficult it is to maintain staff, and just the workforce looks different. I feel like we're in a national shift, and didn't occur to me to think how schools would be affected. Do you see that they're maintaining and attracting the workforce in the school districts as well?
Mm-hmm. Do you mean just as in transportation or overall in the schools?
Overall.
Well, up here in Blaine, I know most of last year in just our middle school alone, our principal and vice principal taught in classes full days for probably 80% of more than that, 80% of the school year, because another challenge is having subs come all the way up to Blaine. And then what we found with some of the challenges that happened with kids becoming somewhat unsocialized, if I can say, teachers were like, oh, I can just work as a para in a classroom for a couple dollars less and not have all the hassle and responsibility that a teacher had, with planning. And so they chose to do that rather than be in the teacher role, which, I have no opinion on that. It's just the reality of what happened up here. So we've had a very rough go of it, and we've even increased our daily rate for substitutes. But with gas being the price that it is, if they can get a job in Bellingham or Ferndale, they're gonna not make the commute. So it's and having a lot of subs is always challenging enough with students, and who need that stability and connection. And I was going to shout out to our kitchen staff too, because that's another way that I get referrals. Is one of many will give me a call and say, hey, you want to check in with this kiddo because I was observing this, and they're just amazing. So
Thanks, Julie. Go ahead, Margaret. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I feel like I'm talking too much anyway.
Not at all.
The last 2 years there's been a lot of turnover here in Linden. I think some teachers not wanting, like, I'm not supposed to be a Zoom teacher, and not really wanting to do that. And I hear that a lot kind of across the board. We had a lot of bus drivers retire, and some who didn't want to deal with the regulations with COVID as well. So the last 2 years, there's been a lot of turnover. But
yeah, I was just going to add that I don't have the background really to have a good frame of reference on it, and I know Nooksack, it seems like there's been a lot of people that have been there for 30 years that are kind of seeing that retirement kind of and shift. But also last year, it was a challenge for students and for teachers coming out of COVID. A lot of kids not having, that routine, establishing that routine again. Kids didn't have that routine necessarily. And so there was a lot of stress, I think, early in the school year, and then a flood hit, and our entire district was traumatized. And so we had a lot of changeover at the end of the year, and a lot of it was related to it was a really rough year for our district, and definitely for teachers trying to support the traumatized student population.
Thanks. I want to encourage people to put their hand up or just shout up if you want to ask a question, because I don't want to monopolize the questions, but I have another one. And this question is, I feel like I should know it, but it's really muddy to me. How were homeless children served with remote learning? How did that work for those families? Go for it, Margaret.
no, I'm sorry, I've got somebody at the door. I was trying to mute.
That's okay.
I know in Blaine, we identified our homeless students, and they were able to be bused onto campus because we had to continue providing services in person to special education students. And so it was not ideal, but we set up an area where they were just all spread out in this mass. I don't know if it was in the gym and then they would have a teacher just covering all the grade levels, and it was pretty creative, but that's what they did. So
it's almost like a one-room schoolhouse, it sounds like, having all levels in the same area with a teacher. That sounds challenging. I have another question, and that is, I'm thinking about mental health resources, and I know it's difficult right now for pretty much anybody to connect with mental health support. Are there other resources you're finding newly difficult to connect families with, aside from obviously housing?
Legal resources comes to mind. Like parenting plan support, DV support, domestic violence advocacy, and confidential sheltered capacity. Legal really popped in my head too, because it's just a limited resource. It's the big need.
Makes sense. And your observation about sheltering domestic violence survivors is a topic that I've heard in other meetings. So I don't know if that helps to hear, but it's on a lot of folks' minds. I want to go back to the chat here. Lisa points out that Lehigh, Low Income Housing Institute, has tiny house cottages in other areas. Some of the schools in Marysville are building them as a capstone project for their school pre-apprenticeship programs. Thanks for that, Lisa. And I know that you've been instrumental in a lot of those apprenticeship programs for students to build. So I appreciate that. And Doug has a long comment, but I don't want to overlook it. I'm just going to read it. The real elephant in the room is that whether you're a family with children or a single adult, whether you're in a hotel or subsidized housing situation or a tiny home village, more people are becoming homeless. And there needs to be more places for people to stay and live at. Yes, yes. A lot of times it's presented as just like a shortage of staff or something. That's the only reason why it can't happen. But we are on the Titanic right now. We've only got 300 lifeboats, but we need 3,000. The specifics of the shape of those light bulbs is different depending on a person's situation. But having places to live is relatively simple as far as literal requirements, a piece of land to do it on, basic infrastructure, physical units built, all one-time fixed costs. The strengths of homes now is our villages are managed by the residents themselves rather than paid staff. This means we can operate a site safely and effectively on a near zero operations budget. Of course, some money is needed, but nothing epic. Meanwhile, so many people who would do fine running their own housing are trapped in the woods or in an overflowing congregate shelter. And Doug, I did not mean to overlook your raised hand. I apologize for that, but I know your summary is long story short. We need to get creative, as what's been said, to have many more units quickly to get people to not be homeless anymore. And what you're observing is what we're observing in the entire system. It's a lack of affordable housing. There's just nowhere for people to go to, and that's a challenge that people are all feeling. And Sherry would like every school board member to hear this discussion. My goal, I'm going to get there. I record all of these. My goal is to have a website so that anybody can go back and reference these meetings. So that's on my mind too, Sherry. And Brianna says that Northwest Youth Services has a mental health professional on staff now that does mental health evaluations for teenagers currently participating in their program. This can also include single parents 25 and under with kids. I did not know that. Thank you, Brianna. That's really helpful.
Yeah, I met with Lisa today, their new associate director, and I met their new MHP that's on staff. And we have a couple of single parents who are living out of their cars with, 4 or 5 year olds, and they are under 25, and they're like, they can come in and get enrolled, and we can give mental health evaluations to help them get into housing. So I thought that was a great resource. So I think you had mentioned mental health, and I just found out about that one. So
thanks, Brianna. That is great to share. I really appreciate that. I see that Vaughn has his hand up.
Yes. Okay. So I promised. I actually asked my students if they had anything they wished to share with the coalition today, and so they said they were in favor of another homelessness shelter and having both a religious homeless shelter and then they also said a couple of them said we give them housing and then maybe have like some sort of like work trade and small rent. So and I didn't give my opinion. I was like, okay, I will say these things, the end, and then so there was that, and they made mention of Civic Field and just different things that they observed. And then when they asked specific questions of the setup of a couple of the tiny home villages, I answered some of those things like how big are the houses and where do they go to the bathroom and that kind of stuff. So I answered those questions. So I wanted to share that. In terms of the rate of people falling through the cracks, which was already bad, pre-pandemic, and then just like exponentially exploded. We don't have just a mountain of adverse childhood experiences in our classroom. We have a whole mountain range, and it stretches from Mount Colshan all the way down to Honduras, and it stretches from Mount Colshan all the way to Ukraine. And so what I'm thinking, and I know that people who work for the city and the government can't brainstorm with me as to all of the potential gray area in policy and protocol. But I have this thought, and it's messy, and I would just like to put it out there. And if anybody can help me with it, I would love that. So tiny home villages or tiny huts, or like, okay, we got this thing in our permitting that says you don't have to file for a permit for a structure that is 200 square feet or less. I happen to know that I can survive okay in 200 square feet. I live in 200 square feet right now. If we in mid county, you got a couple acres out there. Not most, but there's a good number of properties out in mid county that are like what, 5 acres. That's the parcel size. That okay, and it's not going to cost $10,000 to build. Well, it's going to cost some money to build a 200 square foot structure, but there's a way to do it. The Seattle Block Project, they're living buildings that are tiny structures, like $100,000. I'm not talking about that. And so when I think about Unity Village and Safe Haven, and nowadays, and with inflation, God, I don't even know how much an 8x10 would cost now, but I think it's still under 10,000. And then sorry, I saw Doug's comment and it threw me off. But what I'm thinking, so the picture in my head is, if we could have some people who step forward, we have a whole bunch of people on our wait lists who I think would be great neighbors, and there's enough people who are homeless and struggling that there's gotta be personalities that are compatible with those who are property owners. There's just gotta be. And so if that property owner, say it works out beautifully, because it does in my mind, and I'm a fragile optimist, that if there's a property owner with 5 acres and you can put, at least a dozen 200 square foot structures on there, and you have composting toilets, which would be like somebody's going to have a fit over the lack of septic tanks, but you can have a composting toilet and be totally ecologically restorative. So if we do that, and because it's an emergency, because so many people are falling through, because we have all of these adverse childhood experiences, and we're trying to fix all of it, and we're breaking. The people who are not already drowning are breaking. There is so much pressure within the classroom already to try to meet all of these needs. And I just lost my train of thought. I got all too emotional. But anyway, that's the picture. 5 acres, somebody with property, at least 12 tiny home structures, tiny structures that are not necessarily homes, but maybe they could be classified as some sort of emergency shelter. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Vaughn. I really appreciate your passion. I think Doug agrees with you. I mean, his comments are about zoning restrictions, but he's proposing a new type of zoning, like social benefit zoning, where things can be tweaked with current land. And Vaughn, you're also speaking to my secret fantasy of living on a commune in a cob house with windows. I don't think it's overly optimistic. I think it's doable. I think there are communities in the nation that do that, of like-minded people. And I think it just takes some research and networking to figure out how we could do it. So if I come across someone who's like-minded, I will definitely connect them with you, Vaughn. And I hope anyone else listening, if you also have connections like that, hit me up. I'll share it with Vaughn.
May I add something?
Of course.
You said commune, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's a synonym for cooperative. So the cooperatives idea of so Bellingham Makerspace, there's a group now, there's a meetup now, a free meetup. It's new. It's with great. It's like Cascadia Cooperatives, I think is the official name of the group. And they're hosting a meetup on the last Thursdays of the month at 6 p.m. And it's called the Co-op Factory. So in my brain, I'm like, if all these people who are on wait lists were able to band together and take training with like building the foundation for an intentional community. We're no longer a whole bunch of homeless people. We're now a cooperative who happen to be low income. And maybe we're low income enough that we can apply for grants because the state won't give us any funding unless you're low income and disabled and whatever else, you know. There's plenty of people who qualify and all of those things. There's just something missing, and it's just driving me nuts that I feel like the answer is just right there in front of us, but it's not quite delineated. But cooperatives, Co-op Factory, 6 p.m. last Thursday of the month, Bellingham Makerspace, inside Bells Fair Mall.
Thank you, Vaughn. Can you put that in the chat too? I mean, just the group that you're hoping people would connect with. That would be great. And I want to loop back to Northwest Youth Services because Eves Mason Marcus has a comment here for folks who are interested in the figuring out how to connect with those mental health services they offer. So Eve says that Maverick Tang is a director of community and healing services. This is encompassing their behavioral health services. She's a person, I don't know if this person is she, excuse me. They are the person to reach with questions. If you don't have access to the chat, I'm going to read out the email. MAVERICKT, Maverick T, at nwys.org. And Vaughn, Devon Colony at Interfaith has a comment here, is thinking like you. So I think I'm excited to hear more of those kinds of conversations because we do have to get creative, as Doug said, and that is a creative idea.
Hey, can I add on to Vaughn? You know, that's definitely a need out here in the county, out in Nooksack, is we need more resources or more housing options. Just like Julie said, you know, if we connect them with any kind of housing program, it's not, maybe it's in Ferndale, but that's as close as it is, right? It's probably in Bellingham. And it's really disruptive for families, even if we can get them to school and everything like that, to move them into Bellingham. A big issue for families I work with that not homeless, but in poverty and need lots of supports, is that all of those resources are also in Bellingham. Like we talked about, like the driving families into the Cordata area to access all kinds of resources. So just to put on this group too, that, you know, it's housing and, right? So we need all kinds of resources, the way we kind of think about serving families and systems outside of Bellingham or big population areas. So, because there is opportunities, I agree with Vaughn, that outside in the county, and we need to also be able to serve them with mental health and medical and dental and all those things without having to drive, you know what I mean, from Kendall or somewhere, you know, into Bellingham to get those resources.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, I'm gonna keep us on our agenda here. Oh, great, I minimized the screen and I can't see anybody. Good job, Terry. Okay, fixed it. There's a request to read the chat, and I'm trying to summarize that while I lead this meeting, but it's tough to do both. So I will say that if anyone wants a copy of the chat, hit me up, I'll send it to you. My email, one more time, TERI_BRYANT at Whatcom HSC. There is one more question. I don't want to miss it before we move on. Lucy's asking, are homeless kiddos being taken away from their parents by CPS around here? It's a huge problem in some places, losing their kids on the basis that they're homeless.
Well, I've tried to make sure if that is even a hint of, I'm like sensing that thought in someone's mind about CPS. I really like to assure folks that homelessness is never a reason to call CPS. they don't actually, CPS doesn't screen through not attending school either. So if you don't send your kid to school, that's not a screenable call for CPS anymore, due after COVID that changed. So really trying to assure people, and I also try to pair it with working together. We're here trying to do what we can to get in whatever situation your goal is. And so that in itself would never be a reason to call CPS.
Thanks, Emily. That helps. I'm gonna switch gears here to keep us on the agenda. The next item is an update from the City of Bellingham. Katie, do you mind doing that? Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much, Terry. And thank you for facilitating this really important discussion today. I appreciate hearing from you all. I have a few updates today. The first update is I wanted to share with you all and let you know about a downtown neighborhood meeting that's being organized by the Downtown Bellingham Partnership and is currently scheduled to occur on October 24th at 8 a.m. The focus of this forum is to introduce downtown stakeholders to the downtown service providers. It's going to be a similar forum to an event that was held at Boundary Bay last April, where representatives from a variety of agencies that serve downtown Bellingham's most vulnerable populations, including individuals experiencing homelessness, will do a presentation on the work they're doing in the community. There will be time for presenters to answer questions from attendees, and the meeting will be presented as a webinar. And I think the plan is to record it for future use as a resource. So right now the list of presenters includes the homeless outreach team, Lighthouse Missions Outreach Services staff from Whatcom County's crisis response team, including reps from GRACE and LEAD programs, RSU Security, the Downtown Safety Ambassadors, the Community Paramedic, and the Mobile Crisis Outreach Team. So if anyone's interested in learning more about who these organizations serve and how they operate and who to contact, I invite you all to tune into this event. I believe there's a link to sign up on the Downtown Bellingham Partnerships Facebook page. So I would encourage you all to check it out if you're interested. The second update is I wanted to forward this group a link to watch the City Council presentation on winter shelter strategy. Earlier this week, our Community Development Director made a presentation to our City Council outlining the city strategy to support our populations experiencing homelessness this winter season. I'll pop a link to watch that video in the chat for anyone interested in hearing more about the community's winter shelter strategy. A quick high-level summary of what was presented. The presentation outlined both the city's plans to fund a daytime warming center that will operate in the event of a severe weather emergency. And also the county spoke a little bit about the overnight shelter that they'll be funding that will be placed in service also in severe weather. I'll let county provide updates during their time about the overnight side of the programming, but the city's plans right now are to partner with a community provider, Road to Home, to operate a warming center. This center will be open during daytime hours. And while there's not an operations plan in place yet, which we're going to be expecting that in the coming weeks, the presentation provided kind of a broad strokes outline of what we expect this programming to look like and when we would expect the space to be activated. So the presentation also outlined a number of other winter initiatives that are expected to provide support and emergency housing this winter season, including an overflow shelter operated by the Lighthouse Mission, an emergency weather shelter in Ferndale, and a few other initiatives that providers in the community have in the works. So yeah, I'll post a link to watch that video in the chat. Feel free to tune in and learn more. And then the last update I have is I wanted to let folks know that Whatcom Housing Week is coming up. It's scheduled to start on October 15th, and it's going to run through October 20th. Whatcom Housing Week is a series of events that are intended to educate community members about different housing initiatives. It's a great opportunity to learn and engage on a variety of different housing issues and advocacy opportunities. Some of the events this year include a walking tour of the new Samish Commons project, and a session outlining some of the statewide affordability strategies that can compel development and preservation of affordable housing. So to learn more about the events and to sign up, I encourage folks to visit the Whatcom Housing Week page, and I'll post a link in the chat for that as well. And that's all I've got for updates.
Thanks, Katie. I appreciate that. Next item on the agenda are any updates from the county, Barbara or Chris?
Yeah, I can start with that, and Chris will finish up. First of all, I wanted to mention that we are going to have the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance staff person come to our next coalition meeting. And I think that it's a really important, going to be a really important meeting, because that will provide an opportunity for those of you who are, and I think it's probably all of us, are interested in seeing additional resources in our communities throughout the state for homelessness. So this staff person will be getting input from the coalition members as far as what type of legislation, what type of resources are needed to serve those in our community. So I'd encourage everyone to come and participate in the discussion. The Low Income Housing Alliance has led these efforts for years, and counties throughout the state, as well as nonprofits and individuals, have been part of that whole effort, gearing up for the following legislative season. So this will be for 2023. And the word is that I've heard through county meetings, at least, is that there's some concern that there will be a reduction in resources for homelessness. So I think it's really important to provide advocacy in the coming year. So with that, I'll pass it on to Chris.
Thank you, Barbara. And I want to say thank you to everyone for sharing today. This has been a really interesting and informative conversation. You know, as one of the representatives from the health department, I feel like a lot of our attention and focus naturally is around Bellingham. It's been really enlightening to hear folks around the county sharing their experiences. So I really want to thank you for bringing that to this group. I took some notes, and I'll hope to be following up with a few of you. And Vaughn, Doug, and others who've made comments, I appreciate that as well. I do want to say that creativity is something that we need. There are emergencies happening, and doing the same thing you did last year and the year before is not a real good idea if it's leading to worse and worse outcomes. So yes, let's be creative. Vaughn talked about the gray areas between rules. As somebody who works for the government, I can tell you that those gray areas are where a lot of the impactful changes can be made. I like to tell people I'm okay with bending rules. We just don't like to break them. So yes, let's be creative and let's keep sharing these ideas, because there's obviously a lot of room for improvement. Anyway, thank you all. Getting back to the piece I was planning to talk about, I did want to continue on the winter and severe weather shelter piece that Katie picked up. For the overnight part of that, we are also partnering with Road to Home as our contracted agency to operate overnight shelters. We will, during severe weather events, at the Civic Field Stadium, when the weather is forecasted to be at or below 28 degrees, or if there's more than 2 inches of snow on the ground or predicted to fall. That was a compromise, I suppose you could say, that was reached a few years ago. And I know a lot of people aren't real happy about it. I'm not real happy about it either. But those are the procedures we're looking to follow this year. That was kind of the balance we were able to strike between operational capacity and our needs. We're working on a communication plan. We know that it's not real helpful to have a shelter that people don't know about. There was an article in the Cascadia Daily a week or two ago talking about it. There's probably going to be a voicemail that people will be able to call to check to see if the shelters are going to be operating, as well as some websites where that will get posted. We know that word of mouth is a really good way for that to get out. So tell your friends. The health department also purchased some very heavy duty heaters towards the end of last spring that we can deploy if we need to. That's an opportunity for us to be creative as well, bringing heat to some other outdoor, semi-outdoor location. Again, digging into that creativity and just trying to be a little bit better prepared for that. There are the other seasonal beds. The Lighthouse Mission has partnered with Christ the King Church to provide volunteer staffing at the old drop-in center that they're not using anymore. So that'll be an additional 40 beds. They are looking for volunteers. I'm going to put a link in the chat there for folks that are interested in kind of an easy way to engage with this kind of work. That's not something the health department's well involved in. That shelter is kind of between Lighthouse and Christ the King, but they are looking for volunteers. And if you're interested in doing it, I would encourage you to do so. The other thing I want to talk about was just kind of our budgeting process for 2023 is underway. We don't have a final budget out, but it looks not that different than the 2022 budget, which, as Emily was talking about earlier, like things have expanded as a result of COVID in terms of resources available. That's good. The need seems to be growing at about the same speed, so maybe it's not that great. There will be more details about that in the future. We are likely going to have some information on that at next week's Whatcom County Housing Advisory Committee meeting on Thursday morning, which is open to the public here at the garden level conference room at the Civic Annex in Bellingham on Commercial Street. So you're all welcome to attend that as well. I believe there's a link online if you prefer to attend virtually. I think that's all I got. Save some time for questions.
No questions, then I'm going to move on. And this is this Homeless Service Center update. And the reason we give an update is because I don't know how widely understood this is, because things change, programs change, staffing changes, but the Whatcom Homeless Service Center Opportunity Council, our biggest program is operating the countywide referral system for homeless housing for any provider, not just Opportunity Council. So that's why I'm giving you an update. I have a staffing update. Staffing is tricky. We are recruiting for 2 outreach specialists right now, and that closes next Thursday, the 13th. So if you know anybody who's interested, have them get on it. Go to oppco.org and you can apply. Also, we're recruiting for a housing navigator that closes on the 12th. And pretty soon you'll see another post for a program assistant. So that's right there, 4 openings in our 18-person department. That's a pretty big vacancy. So excited to get some good applicants in there. We're moving. I know I keep saying this, but it keeps getting delayed. We're not moving far. We're moving upstairs here at 1111 Cornwall. And the thing I'm excited about is that years ago, before our building was remodeled, the Whatcom Homeless Service Center had its own door and its own lobby. And we were actually open for people who are applying for services to come in for a couple hours a day and ask questions about where they're at, what they can work on, things like that. We called it walk-in hours. And once we are upstairs here in this same building, we'll have access to a lobby upstairs and can bring back walk-in hours. So excited for that. And this housing navigator position will be one of the folks that respond to people that come and ask for support. I'm really excited about this. Our outreach has traditionally been kind of restricted to the city just based on the majority of our funding. But my boss, Greg Winter, has secured some funding, a little bit, that will allow us to expand into the county as needed. So that's awesome. And I want to thank the health department also for a vehicle that will help us do that even in inclement weather. When things are crazy, we can navigate, icy roads. So thank you for that. And then I have a sneak peek for December's meeting. It's going to center on advocacy. So we'll be having a guest from Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. And also I asked Rebecca Quirk from Tenant Revolt to come and speak. And that's a local kind of grassroots group that's doing some work. And I asked her to come and tell us what they're doing. So please come to December's meeting. And it's a timely meeting for advocacy because our advocacy day in Olympia is our opportunity to meet with our electeds and tell them what we want. That occurs in February. So kind of gearing up for that. And on that note, that's all my updates. There's about 3 minutes left. Thanks for hanging out. Especially thank you to all of our speakers for spending the time here. It was so appreciated. And that's a perspective. Your perspective is not one that we always get to hear. So thank you so much. We have a few minutes for public comment or a request for additional topics. So hit me up. Anything?
What date is the December meeting?
The December meeting. Thank you for asking that. It is December the 1st and it's the same time, 3:30. Happens on the first Thursday of the month. It'll be on Zoom. Last year I asked the group, how do you want to keep meeting? We used to meet in person and the YWCA graciously hosted us and folks wanted to continue to do it this way. I'll probably ask that question again in December.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else before we adjourn?
May I say one more thing?
Yeah.
Just to rephrase, there's the International Living Future Institute, and they have a motto that I really that strikes a chord with me and I really resonate with, and I just want to share it. And that's regenerative design that is socially just, culturally rich, and ecologically restorative. They have tons of information. I feel like one of the barriers is also just trying to educate people on what's already there, what processes are already established, and it's like how can we really be creative if we don't know what all the parts are, And so I just think the fragile optimist in me I really think we can do this. I feel like we have the technology, we have the knowledge base. We just need to have things as open source as possible, so that we can have as much of imagination and big-heartedness when it comes to this. I think there's a way to be pragmatic and generous at the same time. And I just thank everyone for being here, and I'm really happy to have heard from everybody too. It was good medicine for me.
Thanks, Vaughn. And I don't know if you noticed, but Lucy gave you a heart. So thank you for your comments. Thanks everybody for being here. It's 5 o'clock. Have a great evening. We'll see you in December. Bye.
Recording.